Hello there, friends. I'm Dani J, Norwell, author of Fairly Familiar and Snapshots of Spain. And today I wanted to come straight out and say I am a recently converted planner. Now, if you're not a writer yourself, this might feel like a really weird thing to admit, but in truth, here in the writing community, most people will define themselves as either a planner or a pantser, somebody who just flies by the seat of their pants. And to be fair, there's also this plancer middle ground, which I suppose I fell into a little bit in the past, but I have become a pretty hardcore planner, and I'm going to tell you the reasons why and why I think it's really taking off and working for me well. So I have read so many craft books. I have read things like Save the Cat and Story Genius on writing, The Plot Whisperer, so on and so forth. And I've always had in mind that it's a good idea to plan things, but to be quite honest with you, both of my books so far are collections of short stories, and so I was able to just pretty much wing it. I was writing short stories, and so they were short enough that when I got to that messy middle where I wasn't sure where I wanted to take things, I was able to just go back through the draft, think about what had happened so far, and plan from there. Well, let me tell you that while writing a novel, that absolutely does not work for me. I tried writing a novel once or twice in the past, and I never got past the 30,000, 40,000 range, which, if you are familiar with the length of a book, that's only about halfway through the story in many cases, at least in the genres of women's fiction and literary fiction, which I write. So it is very difficult to write that many words and then realize that you don't actually know where you're going with the story. And I tried this with a thriller, actually, which is the absolute worst genre, I think, to try and write by the seat of your pants, because if you don't know the answer to the big mystery, then it's really difficult to leave clues for that answer. It's really difficult to leave red herrings. And so if you're just writing willy-nilly, it's going to be a bit of a mess. At least it is for me. Maybe there are other people who really thrive in the pantser method, but for me, I've realized with this longer format of stories, I really need to plan ahead. So here's what I've been doing. I will credit taking the self-publishing course, Publish and Thrive, which is run by Sarah Cannon, and which I've done a separate video on. I'll link to it up above as well as reading The Plot Whisperer, as the two things that kind of collided and made me take on this method of planning. And so what I do now is that before I start a story, I really sit down and figure out my theme, my thematic significance statement, my scenes, and I also create a plot planner, which is a really visual tool that I put on my wall in my office. And so on that wall, I can see each and every scene that I plan to put in this book, and I can move myself along throughout. So I find that really rewarding to be able to see I have a little "you are here" star that moves from scene one all the way to the final scene at the end, and then I know that I've been making progress. Sometimes it's really easy to get stuck, especially in the middle, and to just feel like nothing is moving along. But that really helps me see that I am making progress and I am moving along each day that I'm writing. So, like I said, I do all these things at the beginning, and I go into great depth with this in my first writing process journal entry. So I'm going to link to that down below if you want real nitty-gritty details on what my scene tracker looks like, what my plot planner looks like, what my theme map looks like as well, because there are some really useful tidbits there to help you do this on your own. But for right now, I just want to say that I'm using these tools, and then they're coming into play for me all throughout the writing process. Right now, I'm in the first draft stage of my second novel, and I don't know how I would be doing this without these tools. I'm telling you, I used to be so resistant to the idea of plotting. I felt like if I had a really clear trajectory of where I was going with the story, it would feel boring. It would feel like nothing new could happen. And it's actually the exact opposite. I find that I do still feel fully capable of going off on tangents and adding in separate side plots that I hadn't originally planned on. But because I have the scene tracker and I have a specific plot planning line that I need to move along, I'm constantly coming back to the main theme and to the main storyline and staying on track. So sure, other things happen. My characters do sometimes go off on a whim or have a temper tantrum or whatever else just feels right for me in the moment that day that I'm writing. But the next day when I come back, I'm checking that scene tracker first thing and I'm thinking, I got a little off track. Let me rein this back in and let me carry on the path that I planned. And like I said, I used to think this would be really constricting, but it's actually the thing that's helping me finish these novels. And that's not to say that things won't change. And when I go back into draft 2, I may be changing a lot of things. I may be switching the order of scenes. I may be taking entire scenes out. But at least I know I have something solid that I'm working towards. I have something specific that I am trying to achieve. Whereas in the past, I was just kind of seeing what would happen and then wondering why it didn't work, why it fell flat. But now I have a clear theme. I'm looking at whether or not this is an action-based scene or an emotional development scene. And I'm trying to move things along in a way that will feel interesting to the reader. And I think that this is going to be super useful and super important to me as I go forward into the later drafts as well. As a final note, I am also somebody who tends to like to feel inspired and to go with the flow and not just write on a schedule because I said I would, but actually write when I feel like I'm in the right mindset to write. And while I still attempt to do that, I will say that it's been far more accessible to me to write when I don't feel inspired. Now that I have these tools in place, now that I have a plan and a plot mapped out for myself, because I can go into that scene tracker and I can recognize exactly what it is I wanted to achieve in the next scene. So I'm not only writing things like I want my main character to meet a new person, I'm also writing down how this relates to her character arc. So things such as, is this going to bring up an old backstory characteristic? Is this going to incite one of her flaws or her fears? And therefore, I have a very clear idea of what it is I want to achieve in each scene, and this makes it really easy for me to chug along and just get the scene done, even when I don't feel super inspired. And I think that this is really helpful, again, especially in the early drafts, because at this point, you're really just trying to tell the story. It doesn't matter if you tell it well. It doesn't matter if it's eloquent. You just need to get it out on paper. And then in the later drafts, I can make it pretty. I can make it good. And then I'll probably need to feel a little bit more inspired. But right now, I can actually move myself forward and finish my drafts without necessarily waiting to feel 100% inspired. And that has been a game changer. It's meant that I'm able to write far more quickly, far more often, and see so much more progress. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on planning. I have definitely converted. I am not afraid and I'm not ashamed to say it. I do not think I will be a pantser anymore in my life, at least not with lengthy novels. And that is that. Let me know, are you a planner? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser, plancer, in the middle? I would love to hear from you down below. Bye-bye. See you next time.